Yeah. I was at whenever you talk uh about comics, making comics like on the Discord and stuff, you're always talking about like some pretty hardcore like or OG printing techniques.
Mm.
So that's what you were using? Like what's
Oh my
going
gosh.
on?
Oh man, Ulysses. My background in comics is pretty. Well, it started back in. I was on a ferry ride to Parksville with my grandma, and I wound up picking up an issue of DC Comics Presents 26 just because it had Superman and I think it was Green Lantern on the cover, and I liked those characters.
Yeah.
And then I found a copy of Justice League, which had like a couple of, I think they were fighting Darkseid and a bunch of other things, who I didn't know anything about. Like, this is like my first time doing anything with comics. I was still in grade, I was like 12 or 13, 11 or 12, 12 or 13, something like that. Anyway, and I love those comics. I read them on the ferry ride there and back, and then inside the DC Comics Presents 26 was the 16-page insert of this thing called the New Teen Titans by Marv
Okay.
Wolfman and George Perez, right? And I looked at that and I went, "Wow, this is really neat." And when we came back to the mainland, I saw one of my cousins, and he was a comic book collector at the time. And he goes, "Yeah, you want to get all the number ones you can." So your video about the number one thing is really funny. He goes, "Yeah, you want to start with the number ones." I go, "Wow, this is great because this new Teen Titans, it's going to come up with a number one next month or in a couple of months, right?"
Okay.
So I wound up collecting New Teen Titans from the number one onwards, and I just fell in love with the art. And I always
Nice.
loved to draw, so copying George Perez was really kind of my big thing. And then around that same time, I had some friends in elementary school. This is still elementary school, so they were into Daredevil with Frank Miller, and I
Nice.
I didn't get into that, but I got into it later. And then cause I was always a DC guy, right? So I pick up anything DC. Yes, all of
Yeah.
them. Those are great.
Yeah. This is most of the Born Again storyline.
Hmm.
I
I
since like
recognize that cover.
yeah, there's a TV show coming up. My
Yes.
microphone's all rigged up here in just a second. Yeah, there's a TV show. They're supposed to be based on Born Again, so I figured I'd read them. But yeah, so
It's
sorry, you were
not going
getting
to have any
to
of that.
and
Not going to have any of that
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, so I figured I'd maybe feature it like the actual thing that's in the
Sure.
actual comics. Yeah.
That'd be great. So, yeah, so I was really serious about comics. I bought this book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Oh
And
yeah.
so they talked about all the pencils, all the Bristol boards, all um, the drawing board things. And I was lucky because my dad used to draw. Used to like back in like the 50s or 60s. He had taken a famous artist's online course where you get all these tools and then you practice all the examples and you mail them down the states and then
Yes.
send them back with comments and critiques, right?
Oh, nice.
So my
You
dad
actually
had
did that?
he did that, yeah.
Oh, he did that.
So my dad had the whole set of the famous artist illustration course. There's 3 books of that, and then my uncle, my mom's brother, had the famous artist cartooning course,
Ah.
right? So I actually have both sets in my bookshelf back here. Of the
Whoa.
hold on a second.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. That's awesome. I remember they used to have those in the comic books, like ads, like mailing course.
So I only brought the yellow books, but they're red, yellow, and blue. So the famous artist course illustration
Oh
was very
yeah.
classic illustration, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of where I learned the techniques. So you can't hear me there because my mic's over here.
I can
It's
hear
kind of
you.
where I it's kind of where I learned the techniques for how to do pencil drawings, and then learn how to take a sketch and then enlarge it using
Yes.
like whatever various technologies that they had. They were talking about this thing called the camera lucida, and which nobody uses anymore.
But do you
Here's
actually what? Did you equip yourself with this equipment or you just read up? on it.
I read up on it, and the one
Okay.
thing I learned a lot about was like perspective. I learned that
Right.
stuff here. I learned a lot about after you've sketched it out onto paper using tracing paper to sketch it out and get more detailed with it, and then flip it over and then check all your errors. Because when you turn
Yeah.
something inside out, and
Yes.
actually, funny story. When I went to see Todd McFarlane when he lived in town, he did the same thing. He was drawing a
Yeah.
page of the Hulk at the time, and he'd put up the page backwards to the window,
Yes.
and look at it and start correcting all of his lines, and then
Yeah.
bring it
Yeah.
back down and fix it. Right. So I learned a lot of that technique there, and then I learned how to use just like scribble on the back and then transfer it down onto bristle paper or trace it up through a light. Right.
Yeah.
And then so this is some technique stuff, and so I got really serious into drawing for a long time. That My friends at 12 were trying to start a comic book company.
Oh yeah.
So there were four of us,
It's
and
very
we sat
entrepreneurial, entrepreneurial children.
exactly, and we tried to start a comic book company. And then around that time, my dad took me to a printer that was one of his clients, and I got to see how they took a photograph, or how they would take line art, make a photograph of it, and then run it through a system to make a plate, and then run it, and then they'd say, and this plate would be used to go through the presses. And that's why you have to pay once for the setup, but once you've got it set up, you can make as many copies as you like with a diminishing cost, because that setup doesn't have to be done all the time, right?
Right.
And so I learned a lot of that stuff. But his printer was unionized. So at 12, when I'm asking how much it would cost to print a comic book, it was a little more than our allowances would cover. So I said, okay, let's not do that. Um, and so we just kind of dropped the idea, but we always did still keep drawing our little things. I never really drew a full comic book. I only drew like pinups and pictures
Right.
and stuff
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was a terrible writer. And I never learned a lot about. I never really trusted my own ability to write stories, but I
Okay.
love telling stories through pictures once somebody gave me a story. But I didn't know that till later. And
Okay.
so fast forward to a few years, and then I'm in high school, and I'm still drawing, and I've still got this dream of being like a comic book artist for DC or Marvel, right? Because that was all that was around at the time. And then I think I had the Marvel. I said I got How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and then I bought the Marvel Tryout book, and I
Okay.
tried that a couple of times.
What's the
Just
Marvel tryout? What's that?
It was a book that Marvel would put out that was on 11 by 17-inch paper, and what they do is you see the first bit of the story, all full color, drawn by it was John Romita Jr. It's a little story about Spider-Man, and then at one section they break down to just a pencil drawing for like
Okay.
4 or 5 pages, and you have to ink it and then send that in. And then
Okay.
they give you 4 or 5 pages of blank paper that you have to take. No, sorry, they give you kind of a pencil version where you have to be a letterer, and then you can letter
Okay.
it. I can't remember if they actually did that. It's only 2 pages of lettering. They didn't need to see much. And then they gave you like 4 or 5 sheets of blank paper, and then they gave you a plot and said, okay, this is kind of the Marvel plot that you're going to draw from, right? So it
Okay.
says page 30 or no, page 13. She does this and blah 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 blah. Page 14, all this other stuff, right? So after 4 pages, you draw out this plot based on that. And then there's some other ones where they had some other pages that were inked and they had reduced size and you had to color them, and then you'd send those in as color guides. And so I only did the pencil, right? I should have
Yeah.
done the lettering because I was much better at that. But they could tell I was a kid, and they would send back little notes saying it was really encouraging advice. Just said, keep on trying and just finish your schooling, right?
Yeah.
And I
Huh.
wound up sending pinups to DC and got the same kind of response back. They sent me more drawing help,
Huh.
some other stuff. Yeah, it was really cool. I had a really good connection, but I never really understood how to build a relationship because
Okay.
it's different now. When you're just mailing stuff and getting stuff back in the mail, maybe getting stuff back in the mail, it's easier. It was hard to just sort of say, oh, well, I could keep on doing this and then build a relationship with the editor. I think Sal Amendola was the one who actually wrote me a note saying, Dick asked me to send you some of this preliminary work on this new book that he's putting out about drawing, you know. But, you know, we'd love to hear from you again when you finish your schooling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I never followed up on that.
Okay.
But in high school, we
But
went through
like,
another
sorry, I
run.
have a
Yeah,
question about that. So,
sure.
where did you find out that there was a Marvel tryout book?
Oh, that was in the comic store.
They just, oh, this, it was a thing that they sent out to
They
comic
sent,
stores. Oh, they were
yeah,
selling it.
they were selling it. Yeah, it
Oh,
cost like,
the bastard. They're
it,
charging you to scout you.
that's right. It's a $13.
Oh,
It was like $13 or something.
oh, that is ruthless.
But at the same time, you learn a lot, right?
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course. Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't have said asked for anything more.
At
And
least they are trying. They were trying to
mhm.
like have some sort of scouting program. I now I don't even know what they're doing. So
I see
okay,
that
that's
there's a
very
version
interesting.
too. At the local store down here, they have a version two of the tryout book still.
Oh, they do? Oh,
Hmm.
for Marvel and stuff? Oh,
It's
they
for
do.
Marvel. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm. So it's still active.
I think. Well, I don't know if that's still active, but I mean, who knows how long they've had their copy for.
Right, 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 right. I see. Okay, sorry
But
I interrupted you, but then you're talking
no,
about
that was a
high
good
school.
segue though. That was a great segue because I got into high school, and I was still dealing with this whole wanting to become a comic book artist type of thing. But I was wrestling with the reality.
Right.
Like I'd read all these stories, you know. My favorite artist, like George Perez, would like lie on his couch with his drawing board up and watch TV and draw all day long, right? But he was overweight, poor guy. And then there was Frank Springer for when he was drawing Dazzler. I didn't like his art so much, but they did feature him in his book where they wrote a little backstory of him submitting pages. And he was a runner, so he was like super skinny, right? So I go, oh, so you don't have to be fat to be a comic artist. This is good, right? And then Bilson,
Thank God.
yeah, I don't know what I would do. Then Bill Sienkiewicz had he went through a midlife crisis where he didn't like any of the styles that he was drawing because he'd become like the Neil Adams clone, right, since
Yeah.
the 80s.
Yeah.
So he went away and then came back mid 80s with this whole new Disney painting style, and then his Ralph Steadman kind of pen and ink kind of thing. And I went through a big phase where I was copying everybody. I could rip off their signatures. I could try to draw
Wow.
their artwork. I wasn't very good. I wasn't. I would just copy their techniques. Like I probably do like some of the stylizings of Bill Sienkiewicz, but I wouldn't really have his illustrative mastery or any of that stuff, right? And I was just sort of a drawing chameleon. And
Mm.
then I found some other friends who had this great idea for a comic book. Now this is really funny. This is like 1980 something, and then my friend Jeremy, he goes, "Hey, I got this great idea. There's a couple of ninjas, and they're actually the black and white sides of the same person." And so him and me and another guy named Joe, we kind of got together and started putting together this idea for a comic series, but we didn't know. We knew what they were called. They were called Star and Staff, and that they were both sides of the same coin. And our original was to that there was some kid found this star on the somewhere, a throwing star, and he broke it in half, and suddenly he split into two different people, two different
Okay.
ninjas, black and white. Right, one was a staff user, the other one was a star user, and I thought that was really kind of cool. But that kind of story, after a couple of drawings and pinups and stuff like that, that went nowhere. Meanwhile, another friend of mine named Lucia had met.
Oh, dang it. Hang on, Tori. So you cut out at your friend Lucia.
Okay, so Lucia introduced me to the. She said, "You got to come and see this guy in the library because he's drawing comics." And I said, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Let's go take a look, right?" And so I got to meet this guy named Kenneth Yap. He's drawing this comic story that he'd written, And it's funny because he would draw, like, you know how I was focusing on the professional style. I'd have like the pencil on Bristol, on the full size bristles, and then I'd shrink them down, and all this other stuff. I'd intend to shrink them down. He was just drawing an 8.5 by 11 paper. And then after he finished one page, where it's all like ink, lettered and inked and colored, actually, he'd paint them. He'd
Wow.
flip it over and draw on the other side of the paper. And he'd
That's
make a whole bunch of these,
that's punk rock.
and then he'd laminate them with Mac Tack.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yes. So he had all these books that he'd done since he was a kid, right? I'm going like, so while I was out there trying to solve the business side of things, he was actually doing the work, right?
Right.
Anyway, we introduced him to this concept of star and staff. And he thought it was intriguing, and he agreed to kind of like sign on as a writer for us because none of us wanted to write it because we couldn't figure it out. But it took a little while. I think after we all graduated from high school, we kind of forgot about the project. And then Kenneth and I were just sort of working on other things. Like part of the reason why I'm still thinking about comics is because Kenneth had gotten me involved with working on samples with him. So he would write little stories, and then we built these sample pages of our own characters and send them out to Marvel, DC, and First, and
Hmm.
then get back rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter. Even though they were fully, here's some pencils, here's a copy of the pencils, here's a copy of the letters and inks, right? And then we never went anywhere. So I kind of got into music. And I stopped thinking about comics. And then at that time, Kenneth went through a phase where he wanted to get out of comics and do more kind of personal art projects. So he'd do some of that stuff for his church and for his children, or for the kids in his church and stuff like that, right? So he'd do more of that type of work. And he did a couple of comics in other languages, which is
Hmm.
really neat because he was studying French, and so he wrote something, and so he produced a comic in Spanish. Actually, he wrote a book in French, wrote a comic in Spanish, and then he wrote a couple other scripts. Right, one was something that actually did get finished. It was a book that he wrote called Griffins and Chimeras, which is about a superhero named Griffin who was called in to chase down a supervillain, because he doesn't believe in villains, by the way. I'll get back to that in a second. A supervillain named Chimera who had kidnapped a German gymnast named Sabine from the Barcelona Olympics. And the
Okay.
whole reason for that was because Sabine was a pen pal of Chimera's daughter, and Chimera wanted to rekindle that relationship and get close to Sabine like he was to his daughter, right? He wanted to bring her in as a surrogate daughter or something, a replacement daughter. And it was a really deep story. So Kenneth wrote that and penciled it, sent it to me, and I inked it. Or no, sorry, I lettered it. And then around that time, I was working with a guy at a retail store that I met named Rob, who inked it for us. And so I have the black and white copy of all the original artwork, all the lettering, everything all done up, right? And so that book actually got finished. And then he also wrote a second script called The Year of Penumbra, which I got through laying out on like small thumbnails. And then I blew up some of them using an opaque projector to Bristol. And then some of them I haven't quite gotten to yet. And so one of the things I'm planning on doing is returning to that story in this Substack that I call The Journey to Penumbra, because it's kind of me rekindling my love of comics and comic artwork, and then learning how to draw again. Because honestly, after so many years, I've actually forgotten a lot.
Hmm.
And plus, I started some tools that I want to play with on the digital side, and
Oh, I see.
so this is going to be more of a backstory to the story on the Substack, and then I'll release the book in the story as it comes along. So that'll be kind
Hmm.
of interesting. I hope it's interesting. But then we can turn to what Kenneth did. Once I got him introduced to Substack, he says, can I really star and staff on Substack? And I said, yeah,
Mm.
why don't you do that, right? So he started a Substack. We started a Substack for Star and Staff, and he started writing in some intro pages. And then I'm in the middle of uploading the book now that we're going to release a chapter a week. That's Star
Awesome.
and Staff. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is kind of happening. And then I've invited him to your Discord server now too, so he'll
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah. Yeah.
participate in that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. That's a great overview of all that stuff. And it's a cool story that I like that you there's no waste in trying something, even if it doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go, because you never know. Like now it's like years later and you're that original thing you loved, it's still of value to you, obviously. So it was worth trying something, and now it's gonna get its day in the sun, so to speak. So that's great, man. That's an awesome story.
Well, I kind of thank you and the whole group of people that we're kind of like connecting with through your Discord and through the Substacks, right? Like I've met so many interesting people since you started the Discord server.
Yeah. Oh, well, sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's just the Discord thing, the Discord idea, it came out of a frustration that Substack wasn't rolling out the features that I wanted quickly enough.
Yeah.
Um, I always thought it would be cool to like it's cool, you chat, you text each other. It's fun. It's all right. But at some point, I always start feeling like I don't know. I'm very, very sensitive to fakery, and it's
Mm-hmm.
to me after a while it starts to feel fake for me. I start to feel like that. I don't know if it's real, but like okay, you're posting a meme and you react to the meme, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. There's something weird. There's something weird at us after a while of doing that that just seems off to me. And just talking to people, that's to me, that's a normal way of being a human being. Even though if
Mm-hmm.
it's on the screen, it's like it's second best to actually being in a room. But um, so I always wanted Substack to give like streaming,
Mm-hmm.
like live streamings, and people can hop on and we can
Right.
just like hang out and talk and get to know each other and get to know these interesting stories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Trade inspiration, like actual human beings do.
Yeah.
But they weren't rolling it out. I kept waiting, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. They don't want to roll it out. Discord's got a voice channel, so
Mm-hmm.
I started the Discord, but in order for voice hangouts to happen on Discord, you need like a certain mass of people
Mm-hmm.
because you need a confluence of time zones and people actually up at that time and not having kids running around and have time and be in the mood. So it's we haven't done a lot of like voice hanging out yet. But so I'm like, screw it. I'm just gonna start bugging people to come on Zoom and just like talk about comics and stuff. And a lot of like making comics is a solitary experience, right? As opposed to being in a band we were talking earlier, like
Mm-hmm.
when in your band, being in a band is a highly social experience, and
Mm-hmm.
both paths have their pros and cons. But like since like I'm always at the drawing table, I'm doing like 1 to 3 hours a day and working
Mm.
full time. Like you got, I'm like my mind is like exploding with comics stuff, and like
Incredible.
there's only so many hours of the day I can inflict that on my wife. So,
No,
so I
that's
figured I'd
incredible.
start talking to people.
What's incredible? I mean, you got to find people who share your kind of crazy.
I think so, yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I like going to conferences, right? Like, I'm a technical writer by trade, so my technical communications group used to have a big conference that I go to once a year, and then when that got a little boring, I started finding songwriting conferences to go to, and then hanging with them. And it's really neat because you hang out with people who are all fighting the same frustrations, sharing the same joys, and they get it. You
Yeah.
know, like you're being a guitar player, I can share with you, you know, a new drop tuning that I found and explain that this has been really kind of like changing my life, and you go,
Yeah.
wow, that would be
Yeah.
interesting to try, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It's
just
funny you
really,
say drop tuning. I was like so into alternate tunings. I had those spider capos. Did you ever hear of those? So that you can capo individual strings one at a time.
oh, never heard
So
of
what I would
that.
do is I would alternate tune my guitar. I put a
Yep.
capo up on like fret three, let's say, and then one up on fret eight. So you get these really bizarre tunings and you're jumping around over
Yeah.
these capos, but so you can have like very, very high tuned strings
Yes.
and then your regular tuned strings. It was really, really fun. I was totally into that. Yeah.
Well, it makes different kind of sonic textures. That's definitely
Yeah,
interesting to play with.
for sure. Yeah.
You
So
gotta
yeah,
see that.
comics. Let's. This is a comics comics channel. I
Yeah.
could go on you on about. I had a podcast about music for a while too. So
Well, you showed me your
yes.
Born Again. Okay, let me show you my Born Again.
Am I born again? Oh, you're born again. Yeah.
My so I was at a conference called Istoria that was at an old church at a church that I used to go to, and a guy named Jim Kruger. He's a writer for Marvel, and he was
Rings a bell.
there. Yeah. Anyway, he spoke. It's about storytelling, and he talked about how the really good stories always have character development and redemption and senses of kind of resolution at the end, where you kind of things may never be the same again, but you know they're not where they started, right? And so he described Born Again as a really interesting, good example of that, like through the multiple storylines that intertwine through. I think it was like 8, 9 issues. You get to see these characters grow and change and interact and see how they affect one another, right? So while I was sitting there listening to him talk about Born Again, I'm going on like the internet to try to find how I can buy this as a paperback, right? Well, I couldn't find the paperback. I found this artist
Yeah.
edition with
Nice.
Mazzucchelli, and to date, it is still my favorite artist edition
Mm.
because it has the entire story.
Yeah.
Like I've also got the two X-Men's. I got the John
Oh,
Byrne and the Jim
lettered
Lee,
on the page so you can read the whole thing.
and you can read the entire story. Yeah.
The
So I got
entire
to
Born
read
Again?
the entire Born Again story.
Oh,
Yes.
nice. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
read the entire story in this format
Oh,
first.
yeah. That is rad.
And then I found the paperback version so that I don't have to open this all the time and risk breaking it.
But you can
But like,
compare back and forth,
mhm.
like what was originally done and how it ended up, and you learn a lot that way.
Yeah, because there's a lot of overlays that are missing from this thing. Like they did, because like that cover that you showed me with the blue kingpin head, right?
Yes.
That blue kingpin head is actually done on an overlay
Right.
somewhere, and to give it that extra coloring, right?
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. Like I've got well, it's like we're comparing size here.
Yeah. Oh, I want to get that one next. Yeah, that was bigger
This
than
one's
this, I
good.
think.
And there is yeah, mine's bigger, Tony. There is a part where they show the covers and they have actually like a semi-transparent sheet over
Yes.
top. I can't find it now, but yeah, so it's is it kind of sorry, I can't find it, but is it that's like tracing paper basically that
Yeah.
they but why do they do that? Because you could
Um,
draw.
it relates to kind of the whole printing process,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Like for instance, so there's a couple. Whoops, I just hit Siri for a second. Hold on.
Hey
Where's
Siri.
Siri? Okay, Siri kind of turned on. Did I cut out during that time?
No.
Okay. So, back in the '80s, we had this little thing called the Surprint. So remember, I was asking you on the Discord about your red pencil technique, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so here's a version where they did red pencil on
Okay.
like the Patriot kind of guy here.
Yeah.
And so what they do is they use red pen to draw a bunch of lines in there. You see that?
Yeah.
And so what that is after the colorist does their guide for this page, then when they put it through the printing plates, they knock out all the red,
Right.
and all you see left behind is the coloring, color plates. Right. That's one of the ways to do that. The other way they did this was, let's see. Here's what is that the? Here's an example of
Yes,
the
like that. Yeah.
right where they wanted to have the word saved
Yes.
in a different color or knocked out in white over top of Mazzucchelli's inked work, right? And the coloring. So they would just sort of use this to block out that when they shot that color plate, they would block out.
Okay, so I'm gonna need some explanation, and I'm really interested in this. Like,
Okay.
what is it? What's a color plate?
Oh, okay.
Because
So
everything I went to college for graphic design late.
Yes.
So I'm from the before internet digital era and all that. But when I got into graphic design, like Adobe was established, right?
Yes.
So we didn't go into learning all the plate stuff, right? So I've always wondered how color is done in comics, and I've never been able to find somebody who explains it properly.
well, hopefully I can try. I can
Well, yeah, but
explain kind of
it's like
what I
they'll
remember.
talk about like dyes and all this stuff, but I want to
Yeah.
know
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
not the color's not going on the paper.
So do you remember when you're looking at Adobe Photoshop palettes, right? You
Yeah.
get a choice of two different color modes. One of them is RGB
Yep.
or
CMYK.
RGBA or CMYK.
Yeah.
CMYK is the old style, sorry, it's not the old style, it's the classic printing process where they
Yeah.
had three color inks, cyan, magenta,
Magenta, yellow.
yellow, and
Black.
black. Okay? And so when you got CMYK, those are the only colors that you actually print with. All
Yeah.
right, so you get four color printing. They call it four color process.
Yeah.
And so in order to so what the comic colors would do at the time is they would take a dye and model it after a certain blend of, let's say, magenta and yellow to make
Yeah.
red.
Right.
It's
I
really funny how
understand that part.
right? And so what they'd have to do is they'd have to indicate this is the 50% magenta, 50% yellow
Right.
to make red. This
Yep.
is the 30% blue and 20% yellow to get some kind of an aqua or something.
Right.
They,
I
they'd
get it.
actually do these with dyes. And then the
Okay.
printer, the person who set up the pre-press engineer would have to go through and then model all the different colors and do what's called a color separation, which
Okay.
breaks
What's that?
a color separation is where they break the mixed color into gradient pure color. Like, remember, have you seen like the zipatone kind of
Yep,
dots?
yep,
Okay,
yep,
it
yep.
generates those dots, like dot patterns for each of the
What-
characters.
What's it?
Well, so like if you had like a shape of a square and you wanted it to be turquoise, right?
No, I understand, but what generates those?
The pre-press engineer would have to find either they would do it. I'm not sure if they do it. I don't think they do it by hand anymore. But there was a
Right.
time where what they would have to do is actually use zipatone in different blends and cut around the different areas, and it would take forever to make plates to make
So,
the
okay, so-
source for these plates.
Right. So do I understand this correctly? They get a page,
Mm-hmm.
and it's instead of colors on it, it's a bunch of codes. It's a bunch of codes for what the colors are going to be, and
Or
then
it is color guides. They would actually be the colors. It's just that the person who reads them, somebody has to understand what the mix is for those colors. somebody would have to know.
Are they coloring on the page, the comic artist?
They're coloring on what's called a guide. Like they take a photocopy. Actually, they don't use photocopy. They have it, the old style photocopy was called a photostat,
Right.
And a photostat was an actual camera shot of it,
Yeah.
and then run through another kind of printer on photographic paper. And
Okay.
then what the colorists would do is take their dyes, blend them in very particular amounts,
Yeah.
and then use those colors so that there would always be one color for Superman's blue
To color on the stat.
to color on the stat.
Okay, so the printing engineer gets the stat.
And then they have to look at it, and I think they either punch it into a computer now and just sort of say, all right, this one
Yeah.
looks like it needs 20% blue, 20%
Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah, I
And
get
then they'd
that.
write all this stuff down, and then they would run off a template, like a stencil,
Yeah.
for the plate. Like, so the printer that I talked to, that I went to go visit when I was 12, he gave me a sheet of, it's called Ruby Lith paper, a Ruby Lith acetate. It's got a acetate, like a clear, like an
Like
overhead projection
plastic, yeah.
film, plastic, and it had a waxy kind of a red coating on it.
Okay.
And then I would use an X-Acto knife and cut around different shapes and peel off the stuff that I wanted to appear as the color that I was going to print.
Okay,
So I'd have
so
a negative of the
right.
color that I want to print.
Okay. So that's what I thought. So the coloring of one page, every chunk of color is cut out by a human being with a knife.
Probably back when Stan Lee first got into comics, that's what they would have done.
That's insane.
They would have used the cutout method to get the big blocky colors in there, and then they'd use the zipatone to get like different percentage of
So that's like
dots.
the adhesive.
Yeah,
Yeah, the adhesive sheet to get percentage of dots right
yep,
for like a yellow, they put a zipatone so that it like separates
right.
into
And then they'd have
dots.
and that would give you your page negative at the small size, right? The
Yeah.
page negative, and then they take that page negative, lay it on top of light sensitive paper, and run it through a light, like they would shoot it with a heavy, high intensity light, which would burn
Like at
off
CERN.
certain parts. Yeah, like sir. And then they would develop that or run it through a process that would etch out all of that would burn off all the stuff that light had shown on it. Or yeah, it's either that way or the other way around. Where one of the sides would have been burned off, right? And so they'd have this plate that had whatever they wanted to print as that color
You know,
left on that section.
all that was needed is like for them to do that in like a medieval lab setting with a bunch of beakers and like in like big hoods and like incantations like alchemists or something. It's madness. That's crazy.
Yeah, people
That's
were really
crazy.
serious about all this technical stuff, right? And
Wow.
like, now, like
So
we're really
much to
spoiled.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
that's
spoiled right now.
I just like, oh, I want the same color as Superman's cape. I go in Photoshop, boink. That's it. I'm done.
Right, and if you were to print this live using 4 color, I think they would actually use like almost 6 or 9 color now, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, my
they can
printer has eight.
eight
So it's
inks, right?
still based on CMYK, but
Yeah,
it has like a vivid magenta and a light magenta, and yeah.
yeah. One of them's better suited for photographs, I think. It rarely shoots all 8. It rarely prints all 8 inks at the same time,
Yeah.
right? It'll print like probably all the photo inks first for photographic paper, and it'll print all the non-photo inks for
I'll
something
take
else,
your
right?
word for it.
Yeah, but yeah, I think nowadays because they use computers, they're able to build these printing presses a little differently, so they don't need to have all that extra work anymore.
No,
But
no.
we're talking like ancient days, it's like
That's
a long time
wild,
ago.
man. That's crazy.
And
Yeah.
so I mean
One,
that
one
was
level back, it's like Albrecht Dürer carving into wood to make impressions.
oh man. So when I worked on a youth newspaper in high school for a community center, and we used a one of those IBM typewriters, and it would automatically justify letters for you.
Yes.
And the way
Yes.
it would do that, because it couldn't change the shape of the letter, like it could change the space
Yes.
of the words,
Kerning.
right? Of the
Yeah.
kerning, right? And so you'd often get some lines that were like really crammed together because we didn't have any more inches to put stuff in.
Yeah, I remember when the we were like impressed that the electric typewriter came out. Oh, this is one you plug in.
Hmm.
And the whole feature was that the the letters that
Hmm.
the hammers that hammer ink literally punch ink into the paper, they went
Oh
quicker.
yeah, yeah, they were so good.
But
You
you
know,
know what, Tony?
you still have a typewriter?
Yeah, like I'm a graphic designer. I'm not like a luddite. I'm not a luddite or anything. I'm not like anti-technology, but there are advantages to having limitations on your. That's why I work in traditional media. Like it slows you down.
Hmm.
There are advantages to doing things certain things a traditional way, and some other things. Like I was talking with this other guy about AI. There's like I'm not like, oh, AI, it's so exciting, it's going to change the world. But no, I mean, if it can sort through my photos,
Yeah, that'd be
you
great.
know, that'll save me time, But I mean, it's yeah, I'm not a Luddite, but I'm not excited to be the first to use everything. I think there's a balance.
Well, I gotta correct you there. This clip studio that I played with, it's actually slowing me down. So thanks now technology slowing you down. And then I switched off of all the Adobe stuff to the Affinity suite
Oh,
because Affinity had a one-time cost for
okay.
licenses, and I can use them on all my computers.
Yeah.
Right, so I got a PC over in the other corner, and I got a Mac here, and I got another Mac, and I got my iPad.
Yeah.
So I use Affinity on all of them,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'm
And
gonna tell
it's
you though, Tony, between you and me, I only paid for Adobe once.
and you never upgrade it.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, they actually I bought the suite twice, I think.
Oh yeah.
So they got enough of my money. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't subscribe, I don't do the subscription or anything like
I don't want to do
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't like that whole model of subscribing.
But I am envious of you that you have an acoustic typewriter.
An acoustic, unplugged, yeah. Yeah. Well,
We
that's
had one in my old place before we moved out here in '97. We wound up donating our acoustic typewriter to Union Gospel Mission. Like, just we gave away a bunch of stuff because we didn't have room for it, and now
yeah.
I'm regretting that decision.
Yeah.
So when I start doing more stuff and I have more room in the house that I can put things, I plan to go find myself a nice high quality, you know, manual typewriter, probably red.
Yeah. It's
Because
actually nice because because it has no
yeah,
editing so it really puts you in the and you click 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 click, it's fun. So you kind of having fun not editing yourself. You just write.
I typed my first letter to Santa on it, Ulysses, and I also have a red stapler. So
Oh, nice. Nice. Oops, we get another freeze.
something.
Yeah,
Oh,
we froze you froze a little bit right after your red stapler.
okay.
Um
Well, I was going to say back to the born again stuff, right?
yes.
But or the I thought that the best way to read comics is in the artist editions, but I got the two X Men's, the Jim Lee and the John Byrne X Men's, and
Yeah.
they're thinner because they provide a selection of pages, not the
Ah,
entire storylines.
yeah.
So I feel kind of ripped off.
Well, that so this Batman Year One, you can read the whole story, and the same thing. Like it was very immersive. Like I sat down because it's like IMAX, IMAX comics.
That'd be great. Yeah, and it's all Mazzucchelli too. That
That's Kelly. Yeah,
yeah, because I think year two was where Todd McFarlane kind of did some stuff, right? I think.
I haven't read that one.
Well, I got all those in like regular newsprint back
Oh
in the
yeah,
yeah. So that was a fun story too. Like back in the day, I had just seen this new Batman cape style. It was really exotic looking. It was amazing, right?
yeah,
And then I saw in the Vancouver Sun. I don't know if you remember that paper,
yeah.
but they had a half-page spread, a half-page story about Todd McFarlane who lived in New Westminster.
Uh,
And I went, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And then my mom says, why don't you see if he's in the phone book? So I looked in the phone book for McFarlane, and there was a T. McFarlane. So I called it up and I said, hey, I'm Tony, and I'd like to, are you the Todd McFarlane guy who the newspaper wrote about, and that you drew this really awesome Batman story, and it says that you're drawing the Incredible Hulk now. And he goes, nah, you got the wrong guy. And he goes, I'm just kidding, buddy. What's up? And I
Oh,
said, I'd love
really?
to come by and talk to you about comics sometime, right? I was about 18. And so he invited me out to his place. And I went over
Cool.
there, and yeah, he was in a little apartment in New West. And he had a studio in his bedroom and his drawing table, and I got to see what he was working on. And he looked at my portfolio and he goes, "You know, Tony, there are a couple of things that you need in this world, in this business, to succeed. One of them is storytelling, and the other one's drawing ability. And you seem like you got storytelling, but you know, you're going to really need to improve your drawing ability." And then he kind of gave some comparisons that because he's working in the field, right, he gets the opportunity to improve all the time, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Whereas I'm just doing this on the side.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
Right? And then he gave me another tip too, because I said, yeah, one of the things is I've been trying to get samples together, but all the companies want me to use their characters just to show how I can handle them, but I don't write.
Hmm.
And he goes, "Can I tell you a secret?" And I don't know if I don't think he'll mind me telling you the secret because it has been over 30 years. But he goes, "Can I tell you the secret?" What I would do is I would go find the comic book from the publisher, from a publisher that has the worst comic art that you can see in it, and then distill it to a full script, and then redraw it your way. And then he goes, and then you just say, "I just took this issue of blah 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 blah, and assuming you wrote from a full script, this is how I would have treated it, right?" And
Right.
try sending that in. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't do that. I was getting out of comics at the time. I was getting kind of fed up with it, and I was going to go to music college. So I said, forget
Right.
it. It's too much work. But it was a great idea. I mean, the guy,
Yeah.
he's an excellent artist, and he's an even better businessman,
Yeah.
right? Like I got
Yeah.
that sense. Like shortly after I met him, he actually moved town. I think he moved to
Yeah.
Portland, and then bought the Edmonton Oilers or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and he was gonna buy he was gonna start a hockey card company,
Hmm.
and he was gonna call it the Front Row,
Okay.
so that he could dig at Upper Deck. His whole thing was gonna be, who wants the upper deck when you can have the front row?
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and he apparently farmed that around and everything, to a whole bunch of like managers and stuff, and it didn't pan out. But the guy's like just try things, just go
Mm-hmm.
for it. I really like that guy. I've listened to a lot of his interviews, and every time I feel hyped up, like, yeah, just do it, man. Like, go. Like, yeah, I like that. I like him and Rob Liefeld. I love his enthusiasm and his energy. It's just likable guys.
If you got the National Film Board app, there's a movie on there called The Devil You Know, Inside the Mind of Todd McFarlane.
Oh, really? Eh?
That one's a pretty telling stare. I mean, it's amazing just kind of going into his mind and seeing what he talks
Yeah.
about. Because like when we sat there, we spent like a good couple of hours. Honestly, he was
Wow.
so gracious with his time,
Yeah,
and
super, eh?
I learned a lot about the business from him, but I never really got a accurate an accurate um, understanding of how much a comic artist could really make,
Mm,
because he was telling me, like, because they always give you kind of numbers like $10 a page, right? And I go like, okay, so if I'm drawing 22 pages a month, that's like $220 a month. That's just 1 week of groceries, right?
yeah, yeah,
I can't really. I mean, at least in today's day, it's like twice. It's like 2 days of groceries, but
yeah.
I go like, I can't support a family. I was planning. I didn't know. I didn't have a family then, but I knew I couldn't support one on only $220 a month, and I didn't think I could be fast enough to draw more than one book a month, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of lost interest in that whole scene.
Hmm.
But I've always stayed kind of in the periphery of comic
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I met some other great friends, in the comic that were starting out in comics. I met
Yeah.
this guy named James Lloyd who drew me this neat little caricature back here.
Yeah.
Um, long later recently, I mean, we caught up after 30 years. I met him at a comic book kind of a underground comic book club,
Yeah.
and at that time it was like I don't know if you know any of the locals in Vancouver,
No,
but
no, because back when I was in Vancouver, I was in a band. I wasn't like doing the comics thing.
well, see, these guys were also in bands doing comics,
Yeah.
right? Like Colin Upton, for instance, was in a
Okay, let
noise
me
band.
correct that. I didn't know anybody or really hang out with
Okay,
anyone, even though I
okay,
was in a band. Yeah.
but James knew all the indies. We moved down here from Vernon, and he knew all the indie players in Vancouver and around like Seattle and stuff. So,
Yeah.
we drove down to I drove him to a comic convention in Seattle where I got to meet up with a whole bunch of other people of his heroes, right? And they gave me all these free books, so I took a whole bunch of those home. And then James wound up getting in with another group of people, including this guy named Ian Boothby, who not only is he a writer
Rings a bell.
artist, but he's also I think he's a writer mostly, and he's also an improv actor
Oh,
in
really?
town. Yeah, and I think Pia Guerra, I think might be his wife, and Pia Guerra is a really famous artist who's worked on Saga, no, on Why the Last Man, I think. It's like wow, it's incredible. Just like all these people in Vancouver who are really famous, right? But Ian and was getting got into writing The Simpsons and Futurama, and brought James on board to do that stuff. So he became like this. He's at all the comic book conventions now, where he gets to have his own table set up as a special guest, and he'll draw sketches and other things and sign autographs. So that's kind of cool.
Nice.
And then there's another friend of mine that I met through some guy who a friend of mine introduced me because he met him at a gas station. It's really weird. But this guy named Dario Carrasco, he used to live in Vancouver, and he was a phenomenal, dynamic artist, right? And I got him involved in one of our indie projects just to start working out some stuff. But then he moved to Calgary or someplace in Alberta, but he was drawing Alpha Flight, and he got
Oh,
to
yeah.
draw some other Marvel books, and now he's an independent. He's got his own independent studio that he does work for other companies for. So it's like, and I'm still in touch with these guys. They still
Yeah.
talk to me. It's really amazing that these people stay in touch and they're so gracious to
Hmm.
even though they're famous now, right? That that they still talk to me as a regular human being, which is kind of cool, right?
Good. Good. That's
Yeah.
gotta stay humble.
Yeah, but I haven't talked to Todd McFarlane in 30 years, so I don't know what he's like
Well,
anymore.
I would imagine Todd's pretty busy.
He's in a whole other scheme,
Yeah.
right?
Cool. Well, let's close off by tell me what you've been reading other than those artist editions. If you've been reading anything.
Something that basically most of the stuff that I read are things that my friend Kenneth finds for me, and he gives them to me for presents.
Okay. That's a
Because
good way.
yeah, I don't really have time to buy a lot of books. But what he got me into was a story called Aerosmith, which is kind of like a medieval. Oh, sorry, it's kind of like World War II with magic.
Hmm.
So instead of flying in planes, they all are all the soldiers are partnered with a dragon character, a little thing on their shoulder, and they help them to fly and can do like spells and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so all the same conflicts that humans have without magic, they have with magic still, right?
Hmm.
Lots of rivalries and lots of that kind of stuff. That was kind of interesting. Um, he gave me a book about a whole bunch of Batman stuff. He got me this really big, uh, four, 14 by 17-inch edition of Superman versus Wonder Woman.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was written by Jerry Conway and drawn by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And
Nice.
that guy, I mean, he's the guy that I was always watching. Like he was a machine,
Hmm.
right? He was in charge of the DC House style for a long time. So
Hmm.
if you wanted to draw a character, you would reference his work, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was the kind of that was published back in like the 70s, I think. Superman versus Wonder Woman, and then I tend to read a lot of stuff about artists.
Mm,
So I brought up George Perez, storyteller, and
nice.
the Marvel art of George Perez. This is a book that a friend of mine kind of told me about years ago called On the Art of Drawing, which I still have a copy of it. After I borrowed it from the library and I read through it entirely, but I wanted to have my own copy for the library. Um, then this is an incredible book too. Amazing, fantastic, incredible. It's the autobiography
Yeah,
of
man.
it was the biography of Stan Lee, written by Peter David and drawn by the infamous Colleen
Oh,
Doran. Her
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
is
yeah.
so nice.
Yeah,
And
she's
then
good, and she's got a great Substack.
yeah, I have so much sympathy and empathy for all the work that she puts into things,
Yeah,
and all the personal condition, health stuff that she's going through too. It's incredible.
yeah.
And then Bill Sienkiewicz,
Oh,
Mutants and
nice,
Monsters, and then, haha, of course, the Marvel, the Art of Todd McFarlane.
nice.
So I tend to read a lot of these type of things just because I'm more fascinated by the backstories than I am by the stories.
Okay.
Um, oh, actually, the thing that got me really into interested was, have you ever seen the Hawkeye series on Netflix or Disney Plus?
No, no, no. I'm not. I'm pretty unplugged from all the TV stuff.
Okay, well, there's a book that I found at Chapters. Okay, Chapters Indigo called it's Hawkeye: The Barton and Bishop Saga, with I think it was written by Matt Fraction and drawn by David Aja, and the styles, the colors,
Yes,
everything is so
yes.
beautiful. There's a
That's
whole
that's a highly acclaimed book. I haven't read it, but apparently people love it.
and there's a whole issue which is told from the perspective of the dog.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if I were reading this in a serialized format where I bought like paid $4 for a book and I got all these like missing word balloons and mumbled words and just the dog's perspective of everything, I would have said, "What the hell is this?" But
Yeah.
in the context of the whole graphic novel, it's awesome, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, they
Cool.
used that as a lot of the basis for the Hawkeye TV series.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So yeah, I went, "Wow, this is great. I love this book." So that was
Nice.
really nice. So that's kind of
Cool.
my recommendations.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking some time. I know everybody's busy, but I appreciate you taking some time to talk comics with me. We accidentally sort of talked about the whole, all like some Canadian stuff because Todd McFarlane and Canadian comics creators, but it's at some point we'll do one about about Canada, maybe Canadian characters or something like that, like because we're both Canadian.
That'd be good to do that. Specialize a little bit more in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have this character that I drew a long time ago, back in the '80s, who was kind of a
Nice.
Canadian ripoff of somebody else.
Looks like a British Columbia flag thing.
Yeah, I kind of put that together and I went, hey, this would be kind of neat to use because I was going through a sunset phase, so I always wanted to draw sunsets, and I went, it'd be really kind of neat to put like the BC flag sun there and then put the whole thing together, and so
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Nice.
so I kind of like doing weird things like that. So I was always big on pinups.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks, Tony. I'm gonna stop recording. All like your links and everything is all gonna be in the show notes and all that. So people should
Thanks.
be checking that out. And so yeah, I'll see you around there.
Well, I appreciate you interviewing, just having this chat, Ulysses. You know, I feel honored.
All right, bud.
Take care.
Talk to you later there.
Thanks.